Adam, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much, brother.
All right, can you guys hear me well? And Dariush was super right. We don't see anything for the lights. Sean.
Don, so great to be here.
Welcome to Dubai.
Thank you so much. It's great
very
to be
happy to
back
be with
here.
you here.
Thank you, and thank all of you for coming. Really means a lot to me. Thank you. And I have to thank our wonderful hosts, Darius and Angela. Thank you so much for having us. Appreciate it.
All right, let's have a seat.
Okay.
So I was about to start on talking about Dubai and stuff, but I said, like, let's jump in.
Okay.
Right? You did like 25 movies, a lot of series from all times. Everybody knows you, different generations and so on. But one of the main things that were really grabbing my eyes as well is about people are really battling with procrastination. And you defined some strategy to combat that. Can you share this with us?
Well, let me ask you a question. How many of you would consider yourselves procrastinators? Yeah? See, the thing is, most people assume that the word procrastinator describes a type of person. But that's not the case. You see, procrastination, what it actually is a coping mechanism. It's part of a negative habit. For instance, you know you have to do something that makes you feel uncomfortable. You decide to do something else to make yourself feel good, and then you get distracted and you procrastinate. You know you have to, let's just say, clean up the house. And instead of doing it, you decide to go down a YouTube rabbit hole for half an hour as a way of making yourself feel good. Okay? And the thing about procrastination is, there's a study done, and it said that you've got an 85% chance of working for more than 2 minutes if you start doing a project. So a lot of times, if you don't want to do something, you say, okay, I'm going to do it for 2 minutes, and if I can't do it any more than 2 minutes, if I absolutely hate it, I'll quit it. But once you actually start it, you've got an 85% chance of doing it for more than 2 minutes. So you have to understand that procrastination is not just, it's not a title of who you are, it's a coping mechanism that you use to make yourself feel better. It's a negative habit. And so what you have to do is disrupt that negative habit and replace it with a positive, empowering habit.
And you think it's easy to be done?
No, I don't think it's easy to be done, but I think it's like anything else. I think that self-discipline is one of those cumulative things that you get better at the more you get used to being in discomfort. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, I think that we live in a society where we've got so many things at the tips of our fingers. We call when we want food. We don't go out and hunt for our food anymore. Everything is so easy for us. But when you realize that when you put yourself in a little discomfort, like going to the gym or doing the things you don't like to do, it builds upon itself, and that's how you increase your self-discipline.
That's awesome. So another question came to my mind as well, is like you often talk about if you want to achieve results, ignore them.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of the saying, if you want results, ignore them. Now that probably sounds oxymoronic, right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Rather than focusing on the results that you want to achieve, focus on the process necessary to achieve the results. So if you think about a process as a chain, and each of the links in the chain is a habit, and if they're all successful habits, then you have a successful process that's going to allow you to achieve your goals. But if you're not achieving your goals, if you look through the chain, link by link, and you go, okay, here it is. Here's the weak link. This is the habit that is keeping me from achieving my goals, and you replace that habit with an effective, empowering habit, and you apply that process effectively and consistently, you don't need to worry about the results. The results will come. They may not come exactly when you want them to come. They may not look exactly like what you anticipate them looking like, but they will come. You see, when you're focusing on results, you're focusing into the future, which is different than planning for the future, okay? But when you focus on the process necessary to achieve the results, then you're living in the present. And that's where you're most effective. And it also takes the pressure off, because if you're always focusing on the results, and if you don't achieve the results, what do? Most people look at it like it's a failure, right?
Yep.
But failing is part of the process to success. You cannot be successful without experiencing failure. And if you look at failure as a teacher, then you can adopt a philosophy that I've adopted. And I wish it was mine. I read it somewhere, but it stuck with me. I never lose. I always win, or I learn.
True.
I win or I learn. Okay? Look, as an actor, when I audition, most of the time when you audition for a role, you don't get it. And if I allowed every time I didn't get a role to manifest as a failure, I would never be able to set foot in another casting director's office. But if I look at it like a teacher, maybe I got to prepare for a role for a casting director that didn't know who I was. Maybe I got to prepare for a role that's sort of outside of my wheelhouse. Maybe I didn't get the role because I'm meant to get something else. Something better is going to come along. And when you start framing things like that, not as failures, but as teachers, then you're increasing the process necessary to actually achieve the results.
And this is beautiful what you're saying, because I think trying and failing is still something very satisfactory for the person, but definitely success tastes better.
It does taste better, but you know what quote-unquote failure teaches us? It teaches us what we don't want.
Yeah.
It also forces us, if you're a self-aware person, to do a self-diagnostic, to look at yourself, look at that chain, and say, where in my process chain am I not fulfilling what needs to be done? For instance, you're doing everything right, you're studying for your exams, you've done everything right, but for instance, you're staying up later than you should and you're eating bad food. And so when it comes time for the exams, you feel tired and you don't feel properly nourished. Okay? And you say, okay, I'm going to get better sleep and I'm going to start eating better, cleaner foods. And suddenly your performance level goes up, whatever it might be. But failure can be a brilliant teacher.
Excellent. So, as usual, you're always controversial in the way you talk in general, right? And it's always like a questions that trigger something in some people. And you definitely did a great talk in TEDx,
Thank
right?
you very much. I appreciate that.
And one of the things that you were talking about is the concept of unbecoming.
Yeah.
Again, another
Yeah.
very controversial one. So can you talk about that?
So, from the time we're young, our parents, our teachers, society pushes us to become something, to become someone. But maybe, just maybe, the true secret to meaningful happiness is less about becoming something and more about unbecoming. We're constantly bombarded by the opinions of other people. We're raised by our parents who very often mean well, but they've got their own issues too that they pass down to us. And so we get we get a lot of crap on us, And the more you can strip that garbage away, the closer you get to your authentic self. And your authentic self is one of the biggest force multipliers that you can have in life. A lot of people get caught up on what they think success is. Let me tell you what success is not. Success is not the conspicuous consumption you see on the Instagram feeds of Kim Kardashian. Success is not the airbrushed photos on fitness magazines and fashion magazines. And success is definitely not the constant bombardment of commercials we get 24 hours a day telling us what we have to have or we're not successful. Each one of us has an internal barometer. You have to decide what your life needs to look like for you to be successful. Now look, I bet we have a lot of things in common to be successful. We want to have love in our life. We want to feel meaning with our work. We want to feel relevant. But there's things in my life that I need that you don't need to be successful. And there's something in your life that you need that I don't need, right? So rather than worrying about the definition of success according to our parents or society or anything else, concentrate on your definition of success. I'm going to give you a really quick example. Think about a guy who's a janitor. He's about 70 years old. It's the only job he's ever worked. He's an immigrant. Doesn't speak English very well. Not the first guy that we would put on the top of our list as being super successful. Not that there's anything wrong with being a janitor, not that there's anything wrong with an honest day's work, okay? But what if I told you that that same janitor saved all of his money, he put his only daughter through medical school, she then became a brilliant research scientist who went on to save thousands of lives. Wouldn't you all agree that he was a very successful human being? I would. So don't worry about what other people think is your success. Figure out what it is for you and go after that.
Beautiful lesson. Beautiful lesson. I like that. So all of that will lead us to something which what was the most important lesson you learned in your life? And I will say about the story that I know, but I want to share it with the audience here and all the gladiators in the room, the showstopper story.
The showstopper story.
Yeah.
Well, probably one of the most important lessons I ever learned comes from the story of the Chinese farmer, which I'm sure a lot of you know. But who doesn't know the story of the Chinese farmer? Okay, I'm going to repeat it quickly. So about 1,000 years ago, there was a very modest Chinese farmer. He lived in his farm with one horse and one son. And one day, his one horse runs out of the corral, and his neighbor says, "My friend, what bad news?" And the farmer replies, "We shall see." And the very next day, the horse comes thundering back in the corral at the head of 6 wild mustangs. And his neighbor says, "My friend, what good news? Now you can plow your fields in a seventh the time." And the farmer says, "We shall see." And the next day, his only son went out to break one of the wild mustangs, was thrown to the ground, shattering his leg, which was a life-threatening injury at the time. And his neighbor said, "What bad luck?" And the farmer said, "We shall see." And the next day, the local warlord came to conscript all the young men to go fight in a war in some distant province, but the farmer's son couldn't go because of his broken leg. And the neighbor said, "What good luck?" And the farmer said, "We shall see." And on it goes ad infinitum. And the point is this, that what often appears to be catastrophic in the beginning, with the expansion of time, can prove to be of huge benefit. I'll give you an example. I got divorced 25, 30 years ago. And at the time, it was crushing. It was a failure. It was embarrassing. It was all the things that you can imagine and all the stories that I wrapped up into it. But had I known at the time that it was going to free me to meet my amazing wife, Michelle, who's my soulmate, she's my everything, I wonder if I would have allowed myself to experience so much drama. I'm not saying don't feel things that you have to work through, but I'm saying try not to assign a binary quality to something. This is good, this is bad. This is positive, this is negative. You see, human beings, we hate the unknown. The unknown creates anxiety, right? So we like to categorize things. But like the Chinese farmer, we shall see. We don't know. So this is what happened to me. So they were having an open call for the Karate Kid 3, and I showed up. And there were thousands of people there. And John Avildsen, who had directed the Karate Kid 2, who had won the Oscar for Rocky, he stops right in front of me, and I knew I had about 5 seconds to get this man's attention. And he said to me, "Okay, I want you to intimidate me." And I don't remember exactly what I said, but I do remember it had something to do with seeing him that night in his kitchen with a knife if he didn't give me a screen test. And he said, "Okay, I buy it." And so I got a screen test, right? And I went in, and there's Ralph Macchio. There's the Karate Kid. Now, I was a guy that paid to go see the Karate Kid. I paid to get a ticket for the Karate Kid 2, and now here I am with the Karate Kid, right? And so I had an audition with Ralph, and I really thought I crushed it. And I did. And I drove back to my crummy apartment above Sunset Boulevard, driving by the Hollywood sign. And you know, sometimes when you're an actor, the Hollywood sign, sometimes it smirks at you, and sometimes it winks at you. And it was winking at me that night, right? And I thought that I got this role, and I was on top, man. And then a couple days later, I learned the crushing news that I did not get the role. And I had not felt depression and a sense of loss like that in most of my life. So I went from here to here. Well, fate had something in store for me. About 2 weeks later, they fired the guy that they hired to play Mike Barnes, and they called me back. So now I'm back on top, right? So,
that's a good story.
So we had been training for about a month and a half, learning all the choreography, the martial arts, and we just started shooting. We've been shooting for 2 weeks, and we broke for the Christmas holiday. And so I decided I was going to go with a friend to Las Vegas. And so I drove through the desert, and I was having a really kind of significant pain in my upper left thigh. And I thought it was from all the martial arts that I was doing. So I started taking a lot of aspirin. Don't forget, aspirin is a blood thinner. Mm-hmm. So Christmas Day, 1988, while most people were home preparing to share Christmas with their family and friends, wrapping presents, I found myself bleeding to death in an emergency room at Humana Sunrise Hospital in Las Vegas. I was 22 years old. And when I tell you that things got very real very quickly, it was to this date, it was one of the most terrifying things that ever happened to me. They said, "We have to operate on you. You're bleeding internally." See, what was happening was I had ruptured my omentum, which sits on top of your intestine, and the blood was dripping down on my femoral artery, causing the pain. And the aspirin, genius, is a blood thinner, and so I exacerbated the bleeding, right? So they said, okay, we have to take you into surgery. And I said, what, Monday? And they said, no, in 10 minutes. And I knew that they had to do exploratory surgery. They didn't know it was wrong, so they were going to gut me like a catfish. And I also knew that if they cut through my abdominal muscles, I was out of the movie. There's no way that I could have healed. So I come from a family of doctors, and I said to the doctor, if you can, please resect the muscles so you don't have to cut them. And I remember the doctor saying, don't worry. And I grabbed this doctor, and I said, tell me you're good. And he said, don't worry, I'm good. And then he put me to sleep. I woke up, and I had a 15-inch incision on my abdomen held together by surgical staples. There was a guy in bed next to me. They couldn't get me a private room. He died a day later. Not a good omen, right? And now I get a call from the director of the film. No balloons, no flowers. Just be back at work in 2 weeks or you're fired. I went from here down to here, right? And then something interesting happened. I got angry. I got out of bed that next day, and I could barely make it over to the bathroom. Got back into my bed and collapsed. The next day, I could walk around the entire hospital floor 1 time. The next day, 3 times. The next day, 5 times. And then I had them dismiss me against medical advice. Long story longer, I wound up performing all of my own stunts in the movie, okay? And I always joke that it's a good thing that I wore a black karate uniform, because if it was white, you would have seen the blood that was seeping through. My point is this. Think about that incredible roller coaster journey, right? We shall see. You know, you just landed a lead role in the Karate Kid 3, yeah, then you get injured. So we never know. So as events in our life come at us, and we're always going to have high and tight fastballs and curveballs breaking towards our head in life, resist the temptation to assign a binary quality. This is terrible. This is great. Speaking of great, how many times have we all heard about the lottery winner? That'd be a pretty good deal, right? A year later, who's broke, divorced, and hates life. So if you can resist the temptation and stay in the present and just take things as they come and don't let them knock you off your course, because the only thing we can control is our emotions to the external stimuli in our life. We cannot control other people. Have you ever noticed when you try and control somebody else, the exact opposite happens? They recoil. You don't get what you want by trying to assert your will on somebody. So the only thing you can do is control your own emotions. And a great way to do that is to resist that temptation to categorize events.
What a story. What a story. I think it's a real fascinating story from you, Sean, really. And we sometimes you talk also about strawberry tea and how important it is for the high achievers. The clarity plays a big role
Absolutely.
for long-term performance. Can you share with the audience?
Absolutely. Look, here's the thing. With anything you do, you want clarity and specificity too, okay? And I'll tell you something really important. I believe our last speaker was speaking about fear. There are 2 great catalysts that motivate human beings: fear and love. And fear comes from 2 sources: fear of not getting what you want, and fear of having what you have taken away. So what happens? Human beings create stories. We create stories as justifications and explanations for all the things that don't happen in our lives, or why we didn't get something, or why something was taken away. Okay? And you can have positive stories, but all too often we have disempowering stories. And let me tell you a quick story that will illustrate the power of story. So there was a journalist, and she was in Los Angeles, and she's writing a story about the homeless on Skid Row. And she's talking to this man, about 50-some years old, pretty much somebody that we would all say looks like a homeless alcoholic bum. And she says to him, "How is it that you wound up here in your life?" And he said, "Well, I had a father who drank a pint of whiskey every night. He beat my mother, he beat me, he beat my twin brother, he couldn't keep a job. How else would I have grown up?" And she was so intrigued by this, she tracked down his twin brother. So she shows up and she looks at the address. It's this big, beautiful house. She thinks she has the wrong address. Knocks on the door. This very put-together man of about mid-50s answers the door, just vaguely resembles his twin brother. He invites her in. He explains he's been a doctor in the community for decades. He introduces her to his loving wife and children, and she says, "How is it that you were able to construct this beautiful life?" And he said, "I had a father who drank a pint of whiskey every night. He beat my mother, beat my brother, beat me. Couldn't keep a job. How else would I have grown up? I've never touched alcohol." Two people, identical circumstances, two very different stories attached, completely changing the trajectory of their lives. You need to identify the disempowering stories in your life, and we all have them, all of us, and change those stories for an empowering one. And it's not that hard. I'll give you one more example. Imagine if you had a middle-class father, lower middle class, works 2 jobs, he comes home, he's sore, his muscles ache, and he says, "You know something? Anybody who's got money must have screwed somebody over." Imagine what that says to you as you move through life trying to be successful. You now have a story, an association about becoming successful and earning money that A, you're disappointing your father, who you love, and B, if you do achieve financial success, there's something wrong with you, right? Here's an easy way to flip that story. You know, we've all heard the adage, money is the root of all evil. Well, that's not what the adage really says. It says the lust of money is the root of all evil. So I would say to a client of mine, a coaching client, imagine how many people you can help if you had the financial stability and wherewithal to help other people, to use that money for good. And it's a simple change, but just by, look, our brains hack us all the time, right? You got to learn to hack your brain, okay? Sometimes it's a bit like a fist fight up there. And it's not that difficult sometimes to change the stories that are holding you back, but you have to identify them. Otherwise, you're just going to keep repeating the same process.
Well, I think we can spend a longer hour here. I'm just watching the time, which is, people, by the way, we actually can smile. I know it's very serious.
But I'm still going to get to do my dance number, right? Okay, good. Just making sure.
You think we're very serious, but sometimes we smile. So, what's your favorite movie?
My favorite movie. I probably got to go with The Godfather.
Oh, woo! I love that.
Yeah.
That's mine as well. That's definitely mine as well.
Yeah.
And for people who wants to reach you after this discussion.
Yeah, you know what? Please follow me on Instagram. It's Sean.Kanan. I love to coach people one-on-one. I have a wonderful seminar that's happening on Zoom January 18th, and I just love hearing from people anyway. One of the biggest gifts of this entire event has to be, with people like you, thought leaders, speakers, people that are invested in their success, and all of you who have come here. You're already on the path. You're already so far beyond most people who just float down a stream like a twig, going whichever way the wind blows. You're taking decisive action. And you know what? Action is everything. Listen, don't be afraid to fail. If you're going to screw up, man, screw up big. Take a big swing and miss and learn from it. But take action, and that's what you're doing. And that's why we're all kindred spirits, and I'm so proud to be here with you guys.
Thank you, guys. So, time is up. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, brother.
So much.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you
guys.
so much, everyone.